In 1998, at Toyota's Tahara plant in Aichi Prefecture, the Lexus LX470 was being built on the same production line as another full-size SUV. Both vehicles moved through the same assembly sequence, sharing the same J100 platform and the same 2 UZ-FEV8 engine, with no meaningful difference in their mechanical foundation. But one would leave the factory as a Toyota Land Cruiser. The other would leave as a Lexus LX470. The workers on the line understood the distinction, and the accountants tracking margins understood it as well. But the machine itself did not change, only the badge did. This is the foundation of the Lexus LX470. It was not a fundamentally different vehicle, but a familiar one presented in a different context, positioned to represent something more than its underlying hardware. So, why did buyers pay a premium for the Lexus? And why did Land Cruiser owners immediately see through the difference? To understand that, you have to go back to the moment when Lexus entered the full-size SUV market and what it was really trying to sell. The Range Rover P38 dominated the category at roughly $68,000, but something was becoming clear to anyone paying attention. The vehicle had heritage and prestige, but it needed constant service. Air suspension systems that required expertise most shops didn't possess. Electrical gremlins that British engineering couldn't quite solve. The P38 was beginning to show the cost of its complexity. The Lincoln Navigator arrived to claim the domestic market at around $40,000. It was big, capable, and thoroughly American. But wealthy buyers recognized it lacked something essential. It lacked the refined engineering narrative. It lacked the sense of intentionality that comes from decades of specialization in a single category. Meanwhile, Toyota already possessed something no other automaker in that segment could claim. The Land Cruiser 100 series was the most capable platform on Earth, not as marketing speak. As documented fact, UNHCR fleets used it. Red Cross operations relied on it across Africa and the Middle East. Government agencies and humanitarian organizations had documented the J100 platform operating at 6-figure mileages on roads that would destroy most vehicles. The platform's durability wasn't theoretical. It was proven in the harshest conditions on the planet. Lexus needed a full-size luxury SUV. Not to compete with Land Cruiser buyers, those customers wanted truck capability more than refinement. Rather, the company needed to keep wealthy Americans from defecting to Range Rover showrooms or choosing the Navigator instead. It had a problem and a solution sitting in the same factory. The insight was elegant. Don't spend billions developing a new platform. Don't reinvent what already works. Take the proven machine and change what surrounds it. Charge for the interior, the acoustics, the dealer experience. Let the mechanical content speak for itself through the Land Cruiser's global reputation. The LX470 arrived at $54,000. Above the Navigator, below the Range Rover. It was positioned as the Japanese reliability alternative to British complexity and as the luxury upgrade over American simplicity. The bet was straightforward. Buyers would pay between $6,000 and $9,000 more for leather that was graded higher, for acoustic glass that muffled the world, for the promise that Lexus customer service implied. They would pay for the suit the machine was wearing. Period road tests and sales data confirmed the bet was correct. But the real story isn't about what was added. It's about what Toyota deliberately left alone. When Toyota decided to build the engine powering the LX470, they made a choice that reveals everything about their engineering philosophy in that moment. They chose cast iron for the engine block, not aluminum, not some composite material promising modernity. Cast iron, the material truck builders have relied on since the beginning of the internal combustion era. By 1998, aluminum blocks were becoming the industry standard. Porsche was moving that direction. BMW was. Mercedes-Benz was. Every major luxury automaker was embracing lighter materials, chasing efficiency gains, and the aesthetic of progress that new materials always carry. The direction was clear and accelerating. Toyota chose differently. The 2UZ-FE was a 4.7-liter V8 with aluminum cylinder heads sitting on a cast iron block. This decision wasn't driven by cost savings. If anything, the casting process for iron demands more precision than aluminum in many respects. This was about a fundamental understanding of what the engine would need to survive. An iron block provides thermal mass. It absorbs and dissipates heat more gradually than aluminum, which means the block doesn't experience the stress cycling that comes from rapid temperature swings. It maintains dimensional stability under sustained high-load conditions. When you're towing 6,500 pounds, when you're operating in extreme climates, when you're asking an engine to perform at capacity for extended periods, iron doesn't flex and move the way lighter materials do. The block holds its geometry. The tolerances remain true. The 2UZFE arrived in the LX470 at 230 horsepower. It also arrived in the Tundra pickup trucks, in the Sequoia, in the 4Runner, in the Land Cruiser 100 itself. This cross-platform deployment created a parts ecosystem of a scale that luxury automakers rarely achieve. A shop that serviced Toyota trucks possessed 2UZ-FE expertise. Parts for this engine sat on shelves at every auto parts store that stocked truck components. An LX470 owner wasn't dependent on dealer scarcity or special ordering. The volume of Tundras and Sequoias built sustained the supply chain through sheer demand. The timing belt itself tells a story. It was an interference design with a 90,000-mile replacement interval. This means that if it fails, the valves collide with the pistons and the engine stops functioning. It's catastrophic but intentional. An interference belt allows for tighter, more efficient valve timing. It signals that Toyota expected owners to follow the maintenance schedule, and that when they did, the engine would endure. In 2003, Toyota introduced VVTi variable valve timing on the intake camshafts. Output increased from 230 to 235 horsepower. That 5 horsepower gain barely registers in a highway merge. The real addition was the oil control valve managing the VVTi system. Toyota's service documentation notes that the OCV is sensitive to oil sludge. Clean oil directly affects how long the variable valve timing system survives. The maintenance record doesn't just predict longevity in the abstract, it determines whether specific systems will function. The LX470 also arrived with the hydraulic height control suspension. This system represents peak over-engineering in a luxury context. Hydraulic actuators at each corner allow the vehicle to adjust its ride height based on load and driving conditions. The system is complex, dealer-dependent, and documented to fail through pump wear and seal degradation at high mileages. It became a source of expensive repairs that second-hand owners discovered. But its existence demonstrates that Toyota was willing to invest in capability most owners never fully utilized. The engine was built to last 300,000 miles. The chassis was built the same way. The J100 chassis beneath the LX470 carried lineage most owners never recognized. It was the same body-on-frame ladder design that had defined the Land Cruiser since the FJ40 first appeared in 1960. Decades of field testing, desert deployments, and high-mileage fleet service had shaped this basic architecture into something Toyota understood completely. They weren't experimenting with new platforms. They were refining what worked. A ladder frame consists of 2 longitudinal rails connected by cross members, with the body mounted to the frame through rubber isolators. For a large SUV, this construction offers something unibody designs cannot provide. When you separate the frame from the body, they're free to move independently. The frame flexes, the body flexes, but they're not welded together fighting the same stresses. For off-road use, where a vehicle encounters torsional forces from rocky terrain and uneven ground, this separation becomes critical. A unibody design that twisted under those conditions would crack at the seams. The frame absorbs the movement without consequence. The documented evidence for this approach is substantial. Land Cruiser 100 examples operating in humanitarian and government fleets have logged 6-figure mileages with frame integrity maintained. Those aren't controlled test cycles. Those are vehicles operating on unpaved roads in climates that erode most vehicles. The frame design proved itself in conditions that the Lexus LX470's North American luxury buyer would never encounter. Yet the credential existed silently in the background, inherited directly from the platform's global deployment record. Frame corrosion in salt belt climates is the primary long-term failure mode. This is a material limitation, not an engineering failure. Steel rusts. You can slow it with coatings and drainage design, but in regions where road salt accelerates oxidation, the timeline for deterioration is finite. This constraint applies equally to the Land Cruiser 100 and the LX470. No amount of luxury interior specification changes what salt does to steel over 15 or 20 years. Body mount isolators, the rubber bushings between frame and body, degrade with age and mileage. Replacement requires frame-to-body separation, which is labor-intensive but fundamentally straightforward. Compare this to a modern unibody vehicle where structural corrosion means welded seams failing and repair requiring partial disassembly. The body-on-frame design's weakness becomes its strength when the time comes to fix it. In 2003, Toyota introduced the kinetic dynamic suspension system on the LX470. KDSS uses hydraulic lines connecting the front and rear anti-roll bars through a circuit that allows the bars to decouple when off-road articulation demands it. When a wheel climbs a rock, the anti-roll bar's resistance to body roll would normally restrict how much the axle can move. The bar's function on the highway, keeping the vehicle level, becomes a liability on difficult terrain. KDSS disconnects the bars hydraulically, allowing independent wheel travel, then reconnects them automatically when the articulation forces drop. The system re-engages for on-road stability. This represents peak over-engineering positioned in a luxury vehicle. The engineering was developed specifically for off-road capability that the vast majority of LX470 owners never accessed. Yet the system reflects a philosophy: build for capability that exceeds the market's expectations, then let the buyer decide whether to use it. The platform's documented durability in extreme environments became the Cell X470's invisible credential, something most owners never heard about, but something that shaped the entire vehicle's character. The chassis was built for the world's harshest roads. The interior was built for the world's softest hands. Everything that differentiated the LX470 from the Land Cruiser 100 happened in the spaces where owners would spend their time. The exterior styling was distinct. A more refined grille, revised badging, different wheel designs, but these were visual signals, not engineering statements. The real separation lived inside. The leather specification was the first obvious difference. The LX470 arrived with higher grade material and more extensive coverage than the Land Cruiser's specification. But leather alone doesn't account for the interior quality that period road tests consistently documented. The difference was also acoustic. Lexus specified acoustic glass throughout the cabin, different material properties that dampen sound transmission more effectively than standard glass. Additional sound dampening material was installed in the door panels and behind the trim. Automotive publications tested both vehicles with sound level meters, and the results were measurable. The LX470 was quieter. The NVH data that engineers track showed genuine improvements. This wasn't marketing language. This was engineering spending money to reduce what the driver experienced. The navigation system came standard on the LX470. On the Land Cruiser 100, it remained optional. The Lexus system included a safety feature that reflects the period's emerging awareness of driver distraction. Above a low-speed threshold, the touchscreen input locked itself. The driver could view maps while moving, but couldn't interact with the screen. Toyota's engineers programmed this restriction voluntarily, before any regulation required it. The lockout was intentional. The Mark Levinson audio system carried brand weight most LX470 buyers recognized. Mark Levinson was the name on professional recording studio equipment and $20,000 home amplifiers. The brand represented acoustic engineering credibility that extended far beyond automotive contexts. Harman International licensed the Mark Levinson name to Toyota, and Lexus positioned the system as a genuine audio solution rather than as background music infrastructure. The badge association mattered because it was documented in how buyers perceived the quality difference. California walnut trim appeared on door panels and dashboard surfaces. Revised seat designs created a material hierarchy that the Land Cruiser's more utilitarian approach didn't match. These details accumulated into an interior that felt intentionally composed rather than functionally assembled. Period road tests confirmed the interior quality was measurably superior. The mechanical quality remained identical. The Lexus dealer experience was the final piece. Service appointments were prioritized. Loaner vehicles were provided during maintenance. The brand promise was that mechanical reliability would be backed by customer care, not just by Toyota's engineering reputation. For wealthy buyers, this mattered significantly. The vehicle was backed by a Lexus promise, not a Toyota one. The price differential between the LX470 and Land Cruiser 100 was approximately $6,000 to $9,000, representing 13% to 18% above the Toyota's price. This placed the Lexus Premium at the lower end of documented luxury badge pricing. BMW charged more over Toyota for comparable technology. Mercedes-Benz charged more. The LX470H's premium was actually restrained relative to the broader luxury market. The buyer was purchasing interior quality and dealer experience that the badge difference genuinely represented. What made people keep the car wasn't the leather or the walnut. It was what was underneath and how long it lasted. Numbers rarely tell the truth about automotive markets, but they can confirm when a strategy works. In several production years within the LX470H's run, it outsold the Range Rover in North America by clear volume. The P38, positioned at the segment's peak price of roughly $68,000 to $80,000, began losing ground to something cheaper that promised the same things. The irony wasn't subtle. British luxury was being displaced by Japanese badge engineering applied to an identical platform the British didn't own. The Range Rover's documented problems weren't rumors. The air suspension systems were becoming notorious for failures that required dealer intervention and expensive repair. Electrical systems failed in ways that contradicted the brand's narrative. The LX470H's value proposition was transparent enough that informed buyers grasped it without marketing noise. Land Cruiser capability, Lexus interior quality, price positioned below the British competitor. The market validated the strategy before anyone needed to explain it. NHTSA complaint data for the LX470 across its 10-year production run is sparse relative to the vehicle's complexity and production volume. This consistency aligns with Lexus's documented quality leadership during that era. The most concentrated complaints involved the hydraulic height control system, pump wear and seal degradation producing fault codes. The documentation is clear and specific. Those failures are real, but they concentrate in one system rather than spreading across multiple mechanical domains. The absence of catastrophic powertrain complaints across a decade of ownership confirms something essential. The two UZIFE's fundamental durability wasn't marketing language. It was demonstrated through hundreds of thousands of miles in owner hands. Used market values tell a story that depreciation curves alone don't capture. LX470 values typically exceed equivalent. Land Cruiser 100 values despite mechanical equivalence. Current market prices for well-maintained examples range from $15,000 to $35,000 depending on mileage and condition. What matters more than absolute value is trajectory. The LX470 reached a depreciation trough and then appreciated relative to that low point. 14-year-old and 20-year-old examples command respect in the secondary market. The Lexus badge premium sustained itself, not because of mechanical differences, but because interior quality that aged well mattered when the vehicle was older than most contemporary cars. Buyers purchasing used LX470Hs were acquiring documented interior durability alongside mechanical longevity. The material choices proved themselves across 2 decades rather than collapsing into wear and degradation. The vehicle proved something counterintuitive about luxury automotive economics. When the underlying platform carries genuine documented capability, badge engineering succeeds commercially because buyers understand exactly what the premium buys. The transparency didn't undermine the strategy, it validated it. Then 2008 arrived, and the engineering philosophy that defined the LX470 ended. The LX570 introduced a new platform. The J200 replaced the J100, a larger 5.7-liter 3UR-FEV8 produced 383 horsepower, reflecting the competitive escalation that had consumed the full-size luxury segment during the LX470H's decade of production. Range Rover Sport had launched. BMW's X5 had evolved. Every competitor kept escalating output, and Lexus complied with the market's demand for bigger numbers. But the platform change carried a philosophical shift that horsepower numbers obscured. The J200 was revised body-on-frame architecture, but the engineering direction moved decisively toward electronic complexity and screen-based interfaces. The analog era ended. Dashboard layouts transformed into digital-first designs. Driver interfaces became touchscreen dependent. The fundamental assumption changed. Vehicles would be engineered for replacement within a decade rather than for permanence. The LX470's 10-year production run spanned the exact moment when this transition occurred. Vehicles built in 1998 used mechanical throttles, cable-actuated climate controls, and hydraulic suspension management. Vehicles built in 2007 incorporated drive-by-wire systems, electronic climate zones, and computers managing every component. The LX470 existed across that threshold, incorporating VVTi variable timing and navigation systems while retaining the mechanical foundation that defined the platform's character. By the time the LX570 arrived, that mechanical core had become a design choice rather than an industry default. The Land Cruiser 100 continued production in international markets after the LX470 ended. The Land Cruiser 200, launching simultaneously with the LX570, initially used the 2UZ-FE engine in early production years before transitioning to the 3UR-FE. This overlap meant parts production for the LX470's powertrain extended beyond North American discontinuation. Global demand from markets where the 100 remained in active commercial and humanitarian fleet service sustained the supply chain. An LX470 owner didn't depend on North American production volume alone. International Land Cruiser demand kept mechanical components available at parts suppliers worldwide. Current owner communities documented the hydraulic system's age-related deterioration with forensic precision. The challenges were real, but they came from systems built stronger than the market demanded, not from systems designed for planned obsolescence. The LX470 became the last Lexus luxury SUV engineered with the philosophy that durability mattered more than features, that permanence mattered more than progress. It represents a peak moment, the last time a luxury brand chose forever over disposal. It ends where it began. At Toyota's Tahara plant in Aichi Prefecture, on that same production line where workers in 1998 assembled two mechanically identical vehicles side by side, destiny diverged the moment they left the factory gates. One carried a Toyota emblem. It was destined for humanitarian operations in Africa, for UNHCR fleets that would navigate the Sahara, for government agencies that demanded not refinement but absolute reliability in environments where breakdown meant crisis. The Land Cruiser 100 was headed toward roads that would destroy most vehicles, toward conditions where the luxury of air conditioning was irrelevant and the necessity of mechanical certainty was everything. The other carried a Lexus badge. It was destined for different latitudes entirely: penthouse garages in Tokyo, country club parking lots in coastal California, climate-controlled homes where the vehicle existed as a statement, as proof that the owner had chosen refined luxury over utilitarian capability. The LX470 was heading toward highways lined with restaurants and boutiques, toward climates where the greatest threat wasn't sand infiltration, but the appearance of dust on the paint. The paths could not have been more different. One vehicle would operate at capacity in the world's harshest conditions. The other would cruise air-conditioned roads and return each night to a climate-controlled garage. By any logic, they should have aged into completely different machines. The Land Cruiser should be scarred and durable. The Lexus should be refined and fragile. The divergence should be absolute. 25 years later, something unexpected happened. On today's used market, those paths have converged. Not metaphorically, literally. The Land Cruiser that logged six-figure mileages on unpaved roads meets the Lexus that lived a sheltered life, and they command nearly identical price points. Both attract serious buyers who understand what they're getting. Both still run. Both require investment to keep running. The separation that justified the original 13% premium has not simply dissolved. It's revealed as almost irrelevant when viewed across decades. What makes this convergence remarkable is what it proves about the philosophical choice the assembly line represented. The separation between these vehicles was never about mechanical longevity. It was about sensory experience. The leather, the acoustics, the refinement. It was about surrounding permanence with luxury rather than building two fundamentally different machines. The evidence is now empirical. After 25 years of divergent use, they've both arrived at the same place, mechanically intact, still capable, still valued. For Gen X and millennial men, the LX470 represents something that's become almost extinct, a luxury vehicle that was engineered identically to the truck it borrowed from, not deceptively, not through marketing sleight of hand, transparently. You could choose the cheaper version, and you'd own the identical engine block, the same chassis, the same suspension philosophy. The only difference was in what surrounded you, in the spaces where you'd sit, in the leather grating, in the acoustic glass, in the promise that came from the Lexus badge. That transparency didn't undermine the luxury positioning, it validated it. Buyers made an informed choice, knowing exactly what they were paying for, and then lived with that choice for 2 decades. That era ended abruptly. In 2008, the LX570 arrived with a fundamentally different philosophical foundation. New platform. Electronic complexity escalating rapidly. Touchscreens replacing mechanical certainty. The engineering directive changed. Build for replacement, not permanence. The vehicle would be rendered obsolete in 10 years by software updates alone, and that was acceptable because technology advances constantly. The assumption was no longer that your vehicle might outlast you. The assumption was that it would be outdated before the loan was paid off. But here's what's remarkable about the LX470 now, as it approaches the 3rd decade of its existence. It still functions. Not barely, not in salvage condition. It functions as Toyota's engineers intended it to function. Vehicles that received consistent maintenance are approaching 200,000 miles, with documented systems still operational. Owners have created forensic records across forums and YouTube communities dedicated to the J100 platform. These aren't isolated outliers or cherry-picked survivors. They're the documented outcome of building something stronger than the market demanded. The hydraulic height control system will fail. That's recorded in thousands of maintenance logs. The 2-FE will outlast most owners' interest in keeping the vehicle. That's also well documented. But parts remain available because the platform never actually left production. Land Cruiser 100 variants continued in humanitarian fleets, government operations, and commercial use across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. International demand sustained a supply chain that never shut down. An LX470 owner didn't become dependent on Lexus nostalgia when North American production ended. They inherited access to a platform that's still operating in contexts where durability isn't optional. It's mandatory. If you own one of these vehicles, if you've hit 150,000 miles or pushed past 200,000 or gone further, the comments section is yours. Tell us your mileage. Tell us what the 2-FE has demanded. Tell us about the AHC system's behavior at different stages. Tell us what you've maintained and what's failed and what surprised you. The LX470 owner community has mapped the failure curves with forensic precision across thousands of miles and countless ownership stories. You're not isolated in your experience. Thousands have walked the exact maintenance path you're on. Your vehicle is part of a larger database that proves something essential. When luxury chooses permanence over progress, it doesn't just linger. It proves itself across decades. The question that emerges from comparing those two paths, the Land Cruiser headed to Africa, the Lexus headed to the penthouse, is why we stopped building vehicles this way. When did luxury stop meaning will still work in 20 years, and start meaning has the latest software? When did we accept that permanence was no longer a design goal? Somewhere between 1998 and 2008, that philosophy vanished. The assumption changed. Vehicles would no longer be engineered for decades. They'd be engineered for replacement. The permanence that defined the LX470 became a relic of a different era, one where an automaker could justify the cost of durability because the alternative, building something disposable, hadn't yet become standard practice. The forever car became the exception rather than the rule. What was once a design goal became a luxury, and then it became almost extinct. That's the real cost of this transition. Not the horsepower lost or gained, but the fundamental shift in what quality came to mean. The LX470 exists now as evidence of a moment when that shift was still possible to resist. And then it happened anyway. But this wasn't the first time Toyota made that choice. Now, click on the next video. It's about 1989 when Toyota built a luxury sedan with a blank check and told engineers to chase perfection over profit. A single car that forced Mercedes and BMW to reckon with what luxury actually means, and cost half as much. That was the philosophy at its peak, and then it ended.